Okay, so if you're kind of moving along video by video, you'll know the last thing we just said was that something would be brought forward in 2005 as a result of the minute of exercise in 2004, when we noted we were troubled by the lack of unity both within New England Yearly Meeting and the lack of unity within the FUM board. We were troubled and we needed to do something about it. We needed to do additional discernment. Well, this is 2007. And we will talk about what happens in 2007, because we do move forward with a proposal on as a result of the suggestions from the minute of exercise from 2004, but it doesn't happen until 2007. However, it's also the case that some other things happen in 2007 which are very, very important to the story in New England Yearly Meeting. So we will come back to the minutes that emerged from New England Yearly Meeting as a result of listening to the suggestion of the minute of exercise in 2004 over there in a little bit. It's coming up next. But now there's some things that happened in 2007 that are really key to this story that don't happen internal to New England Yearly Meeting. So in 2007, there is a joint board meeting again in Africa. And there are North American friends present there as visitors or parts of the New England and New York, Baltimore, kind of the New England the North American yearly meetings that have representatives and board members as part of FUM's board. Some of them are there. Some of those folks are New England people. And there's a sermon, there's a devotional shared and a sermon during the course of the couple of weeks that people are there. What happens is the sermon is received by the North Americans as kind of blatantly homophobic and problematic for a whole variety of reasons. And the reception is that FUM's engagement with the pastor or the leaders who were kind of sharing the devotional and the sermon kind of wasn't swift or condemning enough in a public way. And so kind of word spread first on the internet and then kind of just in conversation back here in North America after the fact that FUM was not condoning the sentiment that they felt was being received in the devotional. Now you can see below the context is a little muddled in that there's cross-cultural communication issues. How do we approach scripture? What do we think certain things mean? So it was complicated, but what happened on the ground was people felt like FUM wasn't doing enough to explicitly kind of challenge calls for homophobia. Now, there was actually some addressing of the issue, and a New England Yearly Meeting member, Eden Grace, actually spoke with the pastor and said, this is how this was received. And she reports that the pastor didn't mean for it to kind of be supportive of violence. But regardless of intent, impact there was that people back in North America were saying, we really need FUM to kind of come out and say that this is inappropriate and wrong. We really need them to move on that. Simultaneously at those sessions, as people are feeling these things about what's going on, this other piece happens, which feels a little extraneous, but is important to kind of what happens later. This thing called the Richmond Declaration is reaffirmed at those board meetings. So this is the devotional and the sermon, and people feel as if they're kind of homophobic, and FUM responds to it, but it's not publicly done. So people feel like FUM isn't doing enough to respond to what is perceived as prejudicial behavior in FUM. And at those board meetings, the board says it's important to us as FUM that we reaffirm that this thing, the Richmond Declaration, is important. Now, the Richmond Declaration was really at the heart of the emergence of the 5 years yearly meeting and the 5-year yearly meeting becoming Friends United meeting in the late 1800s, 1886, I think. So The Richmond Declaration is a kind of a very clearly Christian sense of like what those meetings believe that they could affirm about what they believed. Um, and they say this is something that we want to affirm. We declare this. This is our sense of the truth, and we want to affirm it. Because it's a very Christian document, and because for some people it really feels like it's really edging up on being a creed, and even if it's not perhaps creedal technically, it might feel like a creed. There's a lot of resistance, especially to the yearly meetings that are joint yearly meetings that are not all Friends United meetings. And so, for example, New England said, I don't know as if all of our members back in New England yearly meeting can affirm this. And so the minute that comes out in 2007 is really twofold. One, we as FUM reaffirm the Richmond Declaration, and two, it's important that you know that as a yearly meeting, you don't have to affirm the Richmond Declaration to be a part of FUM. So we affirm it as a body, FUM, but we want you to know that if your yearly meeting and you don't necessarily, as your yearly meeting, affirm it, that's okay. You can still be in a relationship with FUM. This is where it's important to remember it's not FUM on top, New England yearly meeting below. Whatever FUM says the yearly meeting has to do. That's not the relationship. They're an association. So FUM does it, and they say you can be in partnership with us even if you don't. Just know that this body does affirm the Richmond Declaration. Well, for a variety of reasons, including folks who feel as if their sense of Quakerism isn't as Christocentric, it's really problematic that at the same time all of this homophobic conversation is going on, challenging to homophobia, searching for more justice, there's also added into the pot the affirmation of this Richmond Declaration, which is in itself a very challenging piece of a minute to come forward, this affirmation. Again, a lot more context down below, including the full text of the scripture that was read at those devotionals and in the sermon that was really complicated, some additional context down there, and also the Richmond Declaration in its fullness is down there if for some reason you're interested. What we come to next, right over there, is what New England Yearly Meeting does also in 2007, coming out of our proposals and kind of crossing with the kind of wake of things that follow as a result of these meetings in Kenya.